Welcome to another episode of Inclusion Talks. Always so good to talk about Paralympians, Paralympic sport, and of course, all ability sport. And we're here, of course, for Aussie Home Loans, who deal with anyone in Australia. We've got clients in every state and capital. They do Zoom as well, which is what we're doing today. Areas of expertise are purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, debt consolidation, cash out, construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans, and personal loans, any loans you like. And they've got 25 lenders on our panel. My name is Dan Lonigan. My co-host, of course, is Cindy McDougall. Always great to have Cindy on the show. She's the one that organises all the guests and all the questions and all the ideas for Inclusion Talks. Cindy, great to have you with us.
Great to be back, Dan. Been a little bit of a while, and I do apologise to our listeners that we missed a week last week, but sometimes, as our listeners would be aware, life gets in the way a little bit.
Certainly does, but we've got some great guests, and we've got an absolute ripper today. Tell us all about it.
Beautiful. So today on Inclusion Talks podcast, we welcome Courtney Lewis. Courtney is an international blind cricket and blind tennis representative, a national level blind footballer, national athletics medalist, and previous multiple national and world record holder for her classification of vision impairment. Courts has tried her hand at para cycling and won a premiership in the blind AFL competition as well. She is the only woman on the Allies' successful AFL premiership team. Courtney is the epitome of an inclusive sport superstar. I've known Courtney for about 7 years, and her mum is one of my closest friends. So I've known her for a long time, and there is no doubt that the sky is the limit for what she can achieve. Welcome, Courtney.
Hi, how you going?
Yeah, it is so great to have you on.
Oh, you really hyped me up there. I feel quite chuffed.
You deserve every bit of it. Your talent is absolutely incredible.
Thank you so much.
Now, you were born with columba of the iris. This left you with less than 10% vision. Can you explain to our listeners exactly what the condition is and how it's affected your life?
Yeah, so coloboma of the iris, it is a key-shaped hole basically in your eye, and it sits basically right on the sight part. So I can't see any further than, let's say, 10 meters with any. It's very blurry to me, and it's affected. It hasn't really affected my life massively because I grew up with my sight. It was genetic on my mum's side. But it's given me a massive need for independence because I've seen all my friends grow up doing things that, I necessarily can't do because of my vision. And it has been quite scary, but I've, grown up and I've learned the little nicks and tricks to, kind of do things the way they can.
Considering you've had your disability your whole life, and you began your sporting journey quite young, I believe it was at Little Athletics. Can you tell us what sport looked like for you and what it was like maybe even at school level?
Yeah, well, in school it was everywhere. Everyone wanted to do, Little Athletics, and everyone wanted to do the cross country and the sports days and all that. But it brought out a competitive side of me that I hadn't really touched into yet. But school sport really made me it made me discover my love for sport, and that I could actually, hey, I'm pretty good at this, maybe I should go into it a bit more.
So it was great to feel included and encouraged.
Yeah.
You were a national level Little Athletics representative, I believe. Can you tell us about what Little Athletics looked like for you? Were you in a separate multi-class group for littles, or did you compete with the able-bodied kids?
Little Athletics, I mean, I went out every Friday night to Little Athletics, and I don't believe there was any separate, disability group. So I was competing with the able-bodied every weekend, and it was really great for my confidence because I was reaching levels that, the able-bodied was. So that even encouraged me more to keep going.
How did you feel when you made the national championships, and where was it held?
I believe the national championships was actually held here in Sydney. It was, I mean, previously I'd made other national championships, so it was still massive for me. But it really, it made me so nervous because, I'd been doing so well here in state, championships and the, Little Athletics and all that. So it was it was very nerve-wracking, but my mum was so supportive, and all my family and friends, they were there with me. So I was very excited to see how far I could go.
Did your disability mean that there are any adaptations that had to be made for you, especially when traveling away for national teams? You were saying your mum and quite a few of a lot came with you. Did you travel with a team, or did you get to actually go with them and engage with them in the lead up and during the events?
No, everything was pretty standard. Like I was invited to the team photos, and we were all on the same flight. So mum did come with me on the same flight as the team. So I was to make sure that I was, looked after, especially. But everything was pretty standard. I competed with them. I stayed with them in the same hotel. We all arrived at the track and all at the same day, the same time. So they made sure to be considerate of me though.
That sounds incredibly inclusive and such a
Mm.
brilliant start to, I guess, a representative level commitment to sport. What was your favourite sport growing up?
Growing up, I was a massive girly girl when I was younger, so I did calisthenics. And I loved doing that from about 6 to about 12 years old. And then I started to venture off into athletics. But I just loved being on stage and dancing and being the little my mum used to call me like a little sassy girl when I was younger. I used to do such like I do the Sharpay dance. It was so good. But I loved doing that when I was younger.
So for Dan and our listeners, Sharpay is off High School Musical, which
Yeah.
was a very popular kids movie when kids of Courtney's age were growing up. And Sharpay
Mm,
had quite a distinctive way of dancing and doing things. So I am sure that that sass would have been well and truly apparent when you were in
exactly.
that stage.
Now,
You
Courtney,
were
if I can just ask you, and of course we're here for Aussie Home Loans. We're doing inclusion talks with Dan Lonigan and Cindy McDougall. I mean, there seems to be no barrier in the way. If you want to try something, you just do it, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's no reason why I shouldn't try new things. Other people, even without disabilities, should. So there's no reason I shouldn't.
No, it's fair enough. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I've got such a supportive network up here in Sydney and community that they encourage me to. So I go for it. And I know that I've got that, protective barrier that I can fall back on if it doesn't work out for me. So
I think that's a huge part of not just inclusive sport, but also able-bodied sport. I think that your support
mm,
network is such an important part of giving you confidence and letting you feel like you can actually achieve your dreams and achieve the things that you want to, not just in sport, but in life in general.
exactly, exactly.
Now, you mentioned you were quite involved in track and field, that you went from calisthenics into track and field. You were
Hmm.
really successful. You represented South Australia and you actually medalled at the Arafura Games, which supported Australia's incredible total of medals at that particular Games. You also medalled at national level in shot put. You were a multiple Australian record holder, and you still actually hold 3 junior records to this day in
Mm.
the F13 discus. What did it feel like at such a young age to hold Australian records? And did you feel like your success helped to build inclusion in your area or your state?
I mean, at that age, I don't think I fully grasped the idea that I could uh, break Australian records and state records and national records. I don't think I actually understood what that meant, but it certainly brought out a lot of para athletes and more visually impaired athletes to come out and say, "Hey, you're doing it. Why can't I?" And I would always be like, "Yeah, come out, come try it." Like I just don't think I think a lot of the records were outdated, and the officials that were at the state meets and all that realized they could update them. And I just said, "Hey, come out, try it." And then eventually there were more people, more para athletes just breaking records within record time. So it was amazing.
It is awesome to see how, just especially in the F13 and the vision impaired area
Mm,
of athletics, how much that's actually grown. Because Dan, when Courtney and my Caitlin first started, there really weren't a lot involved, and it's been great to see a fair bit of growth in the levels of people competing, not just at national level, don't get me wrong and say I'm focusing on national level, right down to grassroots level. I think Courtney touched on sort of how she actually encouraged a lot of people to get involved and they could see that people were doing well. That's actually grown quite a lot in the last few years. And it was something that I think wasn't a tapped potential area. And I think that definitely Courtney and quite a few of the other visually impaired athletes have helped bring it to the fore and help build that coverage and that understanding. And I think it's really helped show younger children with a vision impairment that there are opportunities for them.
Absolutely.
So, Courtney, can you explain what discus and shot put, because that's where you still hold your records? How did that look like for someone with your disability? Most people, our listeners who aren't involved in athletics, I guess would have the picture of Olympic and Paralympic athletes in a ring doing this great big fast spin and throwing the discus or even with the shot put doing adapted throws in an able-bodied format. But what did that look like for you with a disability?
With shot put and discus, everything was pretty much, it was very standard. It was almost exactly like able-bodied. We still threw in a ring and we still did the shot put in the ring as well. But when I was doing athletics, there wasn't a massive group of visually impaired athletes. So when I was competing, it was mostly with intellectual and physically disabled athletes. But the good thing about that was, we could all celebrate our differences and talk about how different it is for us to compete and what challenges we have to overcome.
So it was very social.
Yeah, it was a very social thing, but it was also very competitive because we all wanted to be competitive in our own way and, break records and hopefully potentially get chosen for, Paralympic events. But for me, because I was a TF13, I don't think at that point I was eligible to compete. I think only the TF12s were able to get chosen to compete Paralympically. So that's when I moved more into the sprints and that part of it, because I think that could have been chosen for the Paralympic events.
There was a bit more of a pathway. So for our listeners, not all classifications, we have touched on this in previous episodes, but not all classifications are actually covered with what we call a Paralympic pathway. So a way to actually make the team for Paralympics. So certain disabilities have clear events or set events, and most people, once they get to an elite level or they're in a para squad, their coaches will be aware of what their pathways are and they will guide the athlete into those pathways. But for younger athletes who are there to enjoy it, do the best that they can and just actually get the inclusion that comes from sport, don't actually know about pathways. So an athlete, depending on their classification, can be really good at a certain event, but that event actually does not have a way to make it through to Paralympics. Did you train with an able-bodied squad, Courtney, for your training as well? Were there adaptions, or did you have other multi-class or other vision impaired people with you at your training?
I did. I trained with able-bodied. I was a part of a training school squad with Kathy Lambert. She was one of my athletics coaches, and she actually trained. Her training squad was about an hour and a half away from where I lived. So every Sunday I would travel up, kind of into the country where she was based. It was called the CATS squad, Kathy's athletics training squad. And mostly they were all able-bodied, but I think that pushed me a lot more to kind of get to their level. But it also it didn't alienate me. They all treated me the exact same. Kathy trained me the same as they did. So I think it was very productive for me to go up there with them.
For our listeners, Kathy was actually quite a prominent sports person herself and was an absolutely brilliant contact at Paralympics Australia. So any information and questions that you needed answered or dealt with, Kathy was awesome like that. And I had a fair bit to do with Kathy in the early years. And yeah, I think you were very blessed to have her as your initial coach.
Absolutely.
Her understanding of para was quite huge. So, but I think you touched on the fact that the able-bodied sport has helped push you further as well. So having able-bodied in your training squad and doing some able-bodied work in events definitely helped you become better. You did move away from athletics though. In 2018, you moved into paracycling. So you swapped the track for the velodrome. What was your motivation to change to such a different sport?
Oh, it was such a funny thing. I was very happy with athletics. But Mum and I, we were walking around the city one day and we actually came across a come and try tent for cycling, and there was this bike set up, and it was kind of just like a, how fast can you go within 30 to 60 seconds? And I'm like, why not give it a go? Why not? So I jumped on, and apparently my results came back pretty good, and they said you should come out to the velodrome one day and give it a real shot, see if you like it. And I said, you know what? Why not? So I went out and I ended up loving it.
What was your favorite part about the paracycling? What instilled that love? You were so passionate about athletics and then you moved into cycling. What was it that created that buzz for you?
You know, uh, exercise and just sport in general gives me a massive high. And, growing up, I loved riding around on my bike. So cycling wasn't much different apart from, the tandem aspect of it. But, being on a velodrome is something else. When you're riding around and you're going up to the very top of the velodrome, you're going all the way down, it just, the wind in your face, it gives you a certain feeling that is very addictive.
Explain to our readers, you said you have a tandem person on the bike.
Mm.
What does that involve and what's the reasoning behind that?
So tandem means you have someone in front of you. It's like a two-person bike. The main reason for this is because it's for visually impaired cyclists. So it can be very hard to navigate yourself around the velodrome and, on the roads and all that. So you have that person basically as your eyes so you can see. So my part of it was just to basically cycle as hard as I could for as long as I could, and I didn't have to worry about trying to see if there were like little edges on the track, or if there was an indent or something like that. I had someone being my eyes for me.
That would have been quite scary to put your so much faith in somebody to basically, as you've said, be your eyes around the track. Was that something you had to adapt to?
Oh, it was certainly surprisingly it wasn't actually as daunting as I thought. I only met my partner on the day, so I gave it a shot, but we built a very strong bond off the bat. Um and eventually growing up I've had to give my faith into others for being my eyes. So it wasn't too different, but at a national level, actually, me and my partner, we fell down the velodrome because it was dirty, and we got a lot of burns on our hands, but I still managed to get up and go and do the competition. So I guess I'm too determined to keep going, I guess.
Courtney Lewis is our guest, vision impaired superstar athlete, Paralympian. She's represented Australia in a number of different sports with myself, Dan Lonigan, and Cindy McDougall. Of course, we're here for our Inclusion Talks podcast, and our major sponsor is Aussie Home Loans. They've got over 25 lenders on their panel, and they deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital city. So there obviously was a trust that needed to be built, Courtney, straight away. I mean, as you say, you met this person on the day. Normally it takes time when you are with someone in a sporting arrangement, whether it be in a sport like rowing, pairs, or the fours or an eights, but you gelled straight away. That's incredible, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I didn't really have much of a choice either, though. They just said, this is a professional cyclist. You have no reason to worry. So I said, okay, I'll put my trust in you. And it ended up working great.
Excellent.
So you moved away from paracycling. I'm not really sure what the reasoning behind that was, and hopefully you'll be able to give us a bit of background into that. But your next move was para tennis. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, with the cycling, it just became way too physically demanding for me. I was going through puberty at the time, and I was getting up at 5 a.m. for gym workouts, and the training was 3 to 4 hours on the velodrome, just doing 10 times 200-meter sprints. It was just a lot on the body, and I decided to give it up for that reason. But I still loved it. So I decided to move to tennis after I decided to finish athletics for a similar reason. Um, tennis, I went to a come and try day over in Melbourne just to see what else was out there again. And, when I first did it, I couldn't hit a ball over the net. But by the end of the little camp that was held, I was in the courts where nationals is currently held, and I was able to hold a little rally with one of my friends. So again, I was like, why not see where this goes?
You really quickly moved up the ranks in tennis and you represented Australia at the World Blind Tennis International event in Birmingham. What was it like, one, to move up the ranks so quickly? Like, you obviously, from that very daunting start, you found your feet really quickly and you just flew. What was it like to represent Australia overseas, and how did you prepare for that event?
I mean, at that time, I was one of the very few females in my category to be competing in state and national competitions. So I didn't really have much competition, but almost a year or two after I had started, a lot more girls had joined, and I had actually had like a base that I could, go off of and I could compete regularly with. But getting chosen for the Australian squad to compete overseas was absolutely, it was massive for me. Like I had been currently chosen to go to Italy in 2020, but COVID had just struck and it got cancelled. So I was devastated because I was in my last year of school and I thought this is gonna be my breakout. But I kept training through COVID, and when they eventually told me you're going overseas for real this time, I don't think I fully comprehended it until I put the green and gold on over there.
At the same time, you also represented Australia in blind tennis, literally at the same time.
Mm.
Sorry, in blind cricket. And so you had tennis and cricket at the same event overseas. Cricket is now your passion. But how did you manage the stress and the expectation of competing in two really different sports at the same time in another country?
There were a lot of aspects to it. Thankfully, cricket and tennis were being held at different times. So cricket was the majority at the start of the games. So and tennis was held almost directly after cricket. So I didn't actually have to worry about competing at the exact same time. I could manage it. And both my cricket and tennis families, they were very understanding, and they really wanted to work together to make sure that I had enough recovery time and I didn't have any stress on my hands. They just said, look, you have to be here at this time and here at this time. But the only real struggle that I had was before I went overseas, I hurt my feet pretty badly at the tennis nationals. I got something similar to plantar fasciitis in both feet, and that really came out strongly overseas, which had put me out almost basically after the tennis as soon as I got back. So it was just managing the pain, managing. I also got sick over there. I got gastro straight off the bat off the plane.
Wow.
So I was playing sick on my first game of cricket, but that, funnily enough, that was one of my best games that I played. Almost got 50 runs. I got the first wicket, got the first boundary. So I guess the adrenaline really helps you.
That
Can
is
I just can I just ask you about the cricket, because I've commentated a bit of blind cricket. It's a fascinating game, isn't it? Because it depends on your vision impairment as to what your role is. If because they do place you in various different categories, don't they, Courtney? In regard to the vision impaired cricket.
Absolutely. You've got three categories. B1s is basically no sight or just light perception, where you have to wear blindfolds when you're batting, and you have to wear helmets just for the extra protection. And then
Yes.
you've got B2s where you've got a little bit more vision, but it's still very limited. And then B3s is what I am, is the most sight you could possibly have to be involved in visually impaired cricket.
And the ball's got a rattle in it, hasn't it?
It does. It
All
rattles when it.
levels. Yep.
Yes, it does. It does. It rattles when you when it moves.
So, Courtney, just on that, the Dan asked, does that actually sound different? And is that different to the ball that you use for your blind tennis? Because I've been privileged to be at a few of your tennis events and learnt an incredible amount from watching it. But are they similar or are they different? Can you explain to our listeners what the difference between a blind tennis ball and a blind cricket ball is?
Yeah, so a blind cricket ball, I guess, would have almost a deeper sound to it. I think they've got different shakers in it. With a tennis ball, it's covered in foam, and I guess the rattles are a lot lighter to hear, because a cricket ball is obviously a lot harder, so it can take a lot more. But with a blind tennis ball, it would need to be a lot lighter so it can bounce as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, at that event in Birmingham, you won and you said you were quite unwell, which makes this even more spectacular. You got a silver medal. How did that feel to get that medal? And obviously cricket is now your chosen path. What did that do for, I guess, your confidence and your mindset around this being your chosen sport going forward?
Yeah, I mean, getting within my first sport, getting a silver medal, silver medal overseas, it was something else. It kind of solidified the fact that I'm actually improving, because I built myself from the ground up almost, from cricket. And knowing that, my team, we hadn't competed as a team together at all before going overseas. So it was massive for our whole team, and it was also really big for our up and coming Australian women's squad. And for all the girls around Australia to think we had just got an Australian squad together within 12 months, and we were able to get a silver medal at the Birmingham, in Birmingham. So I think it was just a very good sign that we can actually make a foundation for ourselves and keep going further with this, just like the boys did.
So you touched on that. Was Birmingham a mixed team or was it a women's only team?
No, this was our very first inaugural Australian women's team that we took over. So it was making history.
That is so awesome.
So how many of you had played cricket, Courtney, on a regular basis when you joined together? Or was it something new for you all?
Most of us we had played. Some of us we had played in our state teams, which is mix.
Yes.
But some of us we were very new into the sport. Um, but it didn't take us very long to get a rhythm and build relationships with each other to push ourselves like that.
I think it's incredible that you could achieve so much so quickly. And as you said, be those pioneers for those that are coming up, from grassroots and I guess show what is actually possible and what can be achieved. I'm astounded that, that the group really didn't know each other very well. And you managed to just have that connection that came forward and got you a silver medal. You also do football. So you, as I said at the start, you're multi-talented. In 2022, you were part of the Western Bulldogs winning premiership in the blind AFL competition. You're also a bit of a pioneer in this as well, because you took out the competition for the Allies side and you were the only woman in that side. How did that feel to be the only woman in the blind AFL side?
Oh, I felt like I was among the top dogs. I won't lie. I had so many with blind sports, it's almost everyone does everything together. So I knew a lot of the boys that I was playing with, and they were so supportive. Like I told them, I said, guys, this is my first year playing. I still have no idea what I'm doing. I just need you guys to get around me and just help out. And they said, absolutely, we'll get you the ball. We'll help you out. Don't stress. We all had a common goal and to have fun and enjoy it. So it wasn't really much different, but there were girls on the Victorian team. I think there were 2 or 3 girls on that side, but being the only girl in the Allies side was something pretty special.
With football, you said how cricket and tennis have got the sound in the ball.
Yes.
Is there a sound in the football as well?
There is an ongoing buzzer that doesn't stop. So it's a continuous sound that goes off while we're playing.
So how
The whole
do you do that with
time. The whole
Yeah,
time.
the whole time. So it doesn't ever stop, even if it's on the ground.
does it change sound when you pick it up? I'm totally new to this, so I'm really interested. And
Yeah.
how does it go when people are making noise and calling out names or calling things out? How does that work?
It stays the same sound, but it definitely sometimes you forget that it's making a sound, and sometimes you don't hear it at all when people are yelling out your name and yelling out other teams. But it's definitely something you get used to as you play.
So it becomes more instinctive.
Yeah, pretty much.
So if the ball's coming in your direction, Courtney, and Courtney Lewis is our guest, she's tried every single sport, and every single sport she's tried, it's turned to gold for Inclusion Talks for our podcast today with Cindy McGoogle and Dan Lonigan, thanks to Aussie Home Loans, who deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital city. So does someone say to you, Courtney, the ball's coming to you, even though the buzzer's there as well? I mean, are you close by, or if someone's kicking it in your direction, it might be a 20, 25 metre kick, do they say, Courtney, it's yours, you're on your own, or someone from the sideline who may have full vision or more vision than the players? Because I presume if you're out there on the ground, all your vision would be similar, would it not?
Yeah, I mean, we have a smaller ground than a typical AFL footy ground. It's a lot smaller. But there are definitely the people on the sidelines that can call out saying it's coming towards me. But there's only five or six people on the ground at one time for one team.
Okay.
So I've got one other person with me. I'm a defense player.
Yeah.
So if it's coming my way, my main goal is just to block the other person or try to get it myself and then get it back up in attack. But yeah, there's definitely you can call out from the sideline saying it's coming your way. And I've got, my teammates who can also see a lot better, can call out for me as well.
You're about to play in this week's finals for your new team in the VFL Port Melbourne. Being based in Sydney, how do you maintain your training, and how would you like to see the sport grow to become more national?
Being based in Sydney, to be honest, I actually don't do any skills-based training here in Sydney, but because I train so regularly for cricket, and I do a lot of fitness training, that's really helped my endurance in game scenarios for footy. But growing nationally, I think it's still a very relatively new sport, and because it's based in Victoria, they're still trying to promote it to interstaters. But we're hoping my mum's actually trying to grow a league in Adelaide, that's also open to interstaters. So the ideal let's say outcome would be to get a league maybe in every state, and then just invite more interstaters. But the Allies All Stars and the Victorian All Stars could happen in also every state. It's just growing the foundation and growing the community, hopefully.
And I think that's something, Dan, that is awesome. As I mentioned at the start of the podcast, Courtney's mum, Cole, is one of my best friends, but she is so incredibly proactive when it comes to promoting inclusion. And I'm hoping in a later episode, we'll actually be able to have her on, because her passion for inclusive sport, like myself, has come about because we've watched our children grow and experience sport from a different perspective, I guess. And it's made us want to make that better. I have no doubt that with Cole on board, that Adelaide will have a team up and running. And I think it would be really great to see it grow nationally, because I think and that's what our podcast is all about, is trying to build inclusion opportunities for people with disabilities. And I think that it's got a really great base work and framework happening, and we can see that by the amount of people that are on the uptake now, and Courtney's got a great great team and a great side. So I think we've got it's a really great platform, and I can see it growing hopefully exponentially in the coming years. You mentioned about your cricket. Do you have a coach in Sydney that you work with, and you said that that's your main training? What does your training look like for that?
Yeah, so I have one main coach, and he does almost everything. He also works for Blind Sports New South Wales. He is your go-to man for he's your handyman for everything in blind sports up here. His name's Jason Stubbs, and we train, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week between, fitness training, weights training, cricket training, recovery. There's all sorts of stuff we do, and he's a very hands-on man. He will really you know bond with you and see what your strengths are and how you can improve. Like it's not a general thing for him.
So it's quite holistic as well.
Mm.
Is there any sport, Courtney, you haven't done yet that you'd like to have a go at? I'm sure that if you had a go at it, you'd be quite successful considering what you've achieved so far and all the other sports you've been able to play.
Yeah, look, I think I've almost tackled all of them, but I definitely I haven't tried blind soccer yet, and I don't think at the moment I will. I'm not very good with hand-eye coordination at my feet, so I think I'll leave that one for a little bit. But who knows? Maybe in the future I'll decide to give it a shot. But yeah, for now I'm pretty hell bent on my cricket. See how far I can go with that.
I think it's fantastic to think about how many options there actually are for vision
It's
impaired
close.
athletes and children coming up through from grassroots. To know that there are so many opportunities, I think is such an awesome thing in so many different sports, because as you said, your hand-to-eye coordination isn't great. So what is, I guess, good for one athlete and one child isn't
Mm.
for another. So I just think it's awesome. There are so many opportunities. You've been to a lot of events. What was your favorite event of all time? And you know what? It doesn't have to be sports based. It could be outside of sport and just something that fills your heart. If there was one thing that you truly loved, one event that you truly love, could you tell our listeners what it is?
Oh, I really can't top going overseas last year. And I really also can't top the finals for cricket because we played at Edgbaston Stadium, where a lot of massive games were held. We played against India, and although it didn't go quite the way we wanted to, it rained halfway through. They caught up to our score pretty quickly. I still can't get over how, walking up to the striker's end with having all, the Australian squad cheering us on, that was just a picture perfect moment for me. I can't top that.
The feeling of the history must have been incredibly overwhelming, knowing that you were
Oh,
on that pitch that had been so famous and had so many incredible cricketers on it prior.
absolutely. It was such an incredible moment. I thought, I don't care how I do, I'm on such an incredible pitch and such an incredible ground that it, it doesn't top anything. It truly makes me speechless when I think back to it.
What's your favorite part of being a para athlete?
Being a para athlete, I really love discovering new things that I can accomplish. It fulfills me so much knowing that even with such a barrier in my life, I can still do exactly what able bodies can do, and I can still go out and explore new activities and new adventures.
Has anyone ever said to you you can't?
Um, there's definitely been people that have said it behind my back. I know for a fact. But I've had such a supportive community around me and supportive family and supportive friends that they encourage me to. So it doesn't really faze me.
I think you've
That's all
proved
that
them wrong.
matters, isn't it? Provided you
Mm,
have that support, that's the most
exactly.
important thing. People talk behind people's backs all the time, unfortunately, Courtney, in this world, but they're the gutless ones, I reckon.
And I
I
think you've
reckon too.
proved them wrong, which is the most important part. You've so proved that anybody is capable of achieving. And I think it's probably a great motivator for you in the background of knowing, hey, I'm going to prove this person that I've heard they've said this. I'm going to go out and show them I actually can.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a satisfying feeling knowing that you proved someone wrong.
If you could change one thing about parasport, what would it be?
I would say, even considering this podcast, I think inclusion can still be a lot better. Within some sports, it can be so hard to distinguish what inclusion means to them, because everyone still has their favorite disability to, to choose, and their favorite kind of, let's say, vision impairment in my case. They still have their favorites, they still have their little groups. So in the future, I guess they just need to base it in, the whole entirety of the sport.
So to be more
you could
open
say.
and to know that opportunities need to be for everybody.
Yes, exactly.
If you could go back and give your younger self some advice, what would it be?
I would say it was very rough for me growing up, because, I was a massive overthinker and overanalyst. I would just say to keep going, because it will get easier and you will get better. Just push through it. Remember that you're doing this because you love it, and just keep going.
Why do you think you were a massive over analyst and overthinker? I suppose at the time you didn't know that, did you? But looking back,
No, yeah.
what do you think caused that?
Well, because, at a young age, I did grow very quickly within, the world's eye. And, I was growing, within the ranks, and I was getting lots of, medals and like state and national levels. I think I put a lot of pressure on myself that I needed to keep doing that to be good at what I was doing. And even though I had a lot of support behind me, I was my biggest critic. I had to say to myself, look, you got to keep doing this, because what happens if, you fall now? Like, what have you got? But again, I had that support behind me, and they were massive for me.
I think that was definitely talks we had quite a few times as well. So Courtney, as she said, was a very hard taskmaster on herself, and sometimes she'd have a bad day out on the track, and she was so incredibly hard on herself, and she couldn't actually see that what she'd achieved was absolutely incredible. But to her, it wasn't what I guess she'd built up in herself, expecting of herself, and her expectations. And I think that's the one thing I've noticed through Courtney's journey, is that she's grown so much to understand. And I think some of that maybe comes from swapping to a team sport. I think when you're up against yourself for medals, you can be extremely hard on yourself. But I think, and maybe Courtney will be able to talk to us a little bit about that, I think when you become part of a team, sometimes your mental side of things changes a little bit. And I think it takes you away from focusing on you, and makes you realize, that your efforts are great, and that they are good enough, and that it shouldn't just be you. It's quite an overarching thing, and it is that support, and it is your training, and it is that sometimes you just have a bad day, or your body doesn't want to do what you want it to do.
Absolutely. I mean, with individual sports, you're the only one out there competing. If you have a bad day, you have no one else to blame but yourself. But you also, if you have a great day, that's also you. So it was very hard. But with the team sports, I think it's also come with, growing up and maturing, that, my anxiety's kind of faded down a little bit, and I've got people, going through similar issues, and it kind of gives me an outside view of what that actually means. But yeah, I could focus on just being there for the team and what the team needed. That I didn't actually need to worry too much about my personal performance.
What advice would you give a young athlete in any of the sports that you've done to help them on their parasport journey?
I would say join a community that's really supportive. Find someone that's similar, and basically just train with them. And even though if you don't think you're moving right now, you definitely will coming soon. And to keep going, because it won't happen overnight, unfortunately.
Takes time, doesn't it? I mean, it's all that dedication. I mean, you've dedicated yourself to a number of different sports, Courtney. I think that everyone should take a leaf out of your book.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it takes a lot of time, and blind sports is still a very growing thing. But I think within the coming years, with all the, recent promotion of different sports in the sector, it could definitely become really massive. So I think those young ones should just be patient and just stay updated within their state squads.
I think there's a really important message in what Courtney said as well, and that's for the parents. And I was guilty of it myself, in that you can become quite pigeonholed in thinking that your child should do one sport and that this is the only thing they're going to have an opportunity to do. And I think sometimes as a parent, you don't look outside that square. And I think Courtney is a great example of when you actually try different sports, you gain confidence and you gain ability and you gain understanding from a lot of different areas, instead of it just becoming, I guess, inherently normal because it's the sport that you're doing. So I think, on that front, Courtney gave me a great thought as a parent, that I would give a message to parents to keep your mind open to what your child is able to do. And sometimes they may not be as competent as you want them to be at a certain sport, but there are other things out there, and that there are options and there is growth. And, we talk about inclusion at centres and what have you, but I think it's something that comes right the way down, even to the child, that being inclusive and trying all different things helps all of your abilities. Now, enough of sport. You're a volunteer. You act as an official at events. You're a mentor at your previous school in South Australia where you grew up. You've helped to run events to promote women's participation in sport. What's your favourite part of volunteering?
My favorite part is basically everything that you just said. Getting, growing the community and getting more people involved, and especially I'm very passionate about children and young people. I really love getting them involved and giving them hope that there definitely are options out there for them, because I think a lot of people hold back because they don't know about the opportunities that are held for them. So my job and my passion is really, exploiting that opportunity for them and getting them involved.
What did your role involve as a mentor? You went back to your previous school. What did that involve, and what message? I'm assuming it would be similar to what you just said. What message did you want to pass through to those kids that are in the environment that you were in, 5-10 years ago? What did that involve for you?
Yeah, I mean, back at my old primary school, I was just like them, and it was great watching how much the school had evolved just with the inclusion and the opportunities that were given to them. What I wanted to do is just continue that and tell them all my journeys and everything that I had been involved in. I loved watching their eyes glow and see that, they could have the same pathway. But yeah, my job there was to just give them hope and give them the resources to do exactly what I could.
You definitely did a good job of that. Now, for my final question, Courtney, what is your ultimate goal, and where do you see yourself personally in 5 years' time?
My ultimate goal, well, sporting wise, it would be to be one of the best women's Australian cricketers. That's always going to be my ultimate goal. But personally, in 5 years, I'm hoping to finish my studies in early childhood education. I want to be a diploma. Um, Potentially have bought maybe an apartment or a house. And just, maybe being an advocate for women's participation in blind sports.
Courtney, it's been fantastic chatting to you. You are an inspiration. All the sports that, as I said a bit earlier, that you've tried or touched, turned to gold for you. I mean, can I ask you one more question? You talked about your hand-eye coordination. You thought that might be a little bit of an issue playing soccer.
Yeah,
That certainly hasn't stopped you in your other sports, has it?
I know. No, it hasn't. Maybe it's just I'm all burnt out from trying new things. I mean, I'm a lot older now, so I've got
Correct.
different priorities in life. So I think it's just I'm stuck in my ways now. I've chosen my sport.
No, that's fair enough. But it's yeah, I just thought that was an interesting comment before that if I get
Yeah.
to ask it, I thought I'm sure there's nothing wrong with your hand-eye coordination with all the other sports you've done, and very quickly you've become a star. But we thank you very much for joining us on our Inclusion Talks podcast. We're here, of course, for Aussie Home Loans. Without them, we wouldn't have a show, and we thank them for getting right behind us. The areas of expertise are plenty. including purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, debt consolidation, cash out construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans and personal loans. They've also got over 25 lenders on their panel, and they deal with anyone in Australia, clients in every state and capital city. And like what we do with our podcast for Inclusion Talks for Aussie Home Loans, they do Zoom as well. Thank you for joining us, Courtney. And Cindy, as usual, sensational guest.
Yeah, she's pretty special. So thanks so much, Courtney, and thanks, Dan.
Good on you,
Thank you
guys.
so much for having me.
Pleasure.